March 24th, 1945, Combat Information Center, USS Bush, somewhere off the northwest tip of Okinawa. The air inside buzzed, not just from nerves, but from all that radar gear. On the SG surface search radar, phosphorescent lines swept in lazy circles, ghosts flickering in the gloom. James Patterson, radar op with a chip on his shoulder and not enough coffee, fiddled with the gain like he was tuning in a distant baseball game. Suddenly, there they were, blips piling up at 340 degrees, 62 miles out, at least 50 planes, all inbound from Kyushu. Not a drill. Not a good sign. Commander Roland Westholm, probably running on nothing but cigarettes and adrenaline, grabbed the TBS radio and started barking orders. Task Force 58 had this whole spiderweb of 16 radar picket ships strung around Okinawa like a high-tech tripwire. In theory, nothing with wings could sneak through. That's the thing, though. All this fancy gear, it was supposed to make them untouchable. Instead, it was about to make them the bullseye for the wildest suicide assault in naval history. The Imperial Japanese Navy, they'd gone all in on Kamikaze. These guys didn't expect to come home. Their job? Punch a hole in the picket line, die trying, and take an American ship with them. It was ugly math. One pilot, one plane, one ship. No frills, no second chances. The old game of destroyers hunting submarines, dead and gone. Now, these destroyers were more like high-tech bait, sitting out there, lighting up the sky for every Japanese pilot looking for glory or vengeance. Each radar picket station sat anywhere from 15 to 95 miles out from Point Bolo, that little speck on Okinawa's Zampa Misaki Peninsula. By April 1st, 7 stations were up and running. Eventually, they'd push it to 16 as things got crazier. Out on the waves, USS Laffey was chugging along at 15 knots, her Sumner-class hull slicing through the swells, 2,200 tons of steel and guts. Commander Frederick Julian Becton studied his radar like a man watching a storm roll in. On board, 336 men, plus enough flak guns to make any kamikaze pilot seriously reconsider his life choices. 6 5-inches, 12 40mm Bofors, 11 20mm Oerlikons, and fire control radars bristling everywhere. The Mark 37 gun director paired with the Mark 25 radar, all of it feeding into the CIC Combat Information Center, basically the ship's brain. Not like the old days when radar was just some box in the corner. Now, air search radar pulled in targets at 60 miles or more, surface search out to 15. They even had gear to figure out how high the bogies were, and lines to the fighter boys overhead, so if something nasty popped up, they could vector in support. I don't know. Here's the kicker. In the old days, shooting at aircraft was like throwing rocks at birds. Maybe a 2% chance of hitting anything. Now, with radar guiding the guns and those nifty proximity shells that exploded just near the target, suddenly you're looking at 20% hit rates, easy. Multiply that out, and you've got a literal wall of steel and shrapnel waiting for any kamikaze dumb enough to come close. Meanwhile, guys like Lieutenant Howell Chering, running around in those little landing craft support gunboats, were under no illusions. He called it straight. The Picket destroyers were bait, plain and simple. Draw in the kamikazes, let the fighters and flak chew them up before they even sniffed the big fleet. It was gutsy and just a bit nuts. Flip to the other side. Over at Kanoya Airfield, Lieutenant Yukioki and his squadron were prepping for Operation Kikusui, floating chrysanthemums, which sounds poetic until you realize it means waves of death in the sky. 355 kamikazes, 341 bombers, all set to smash the American fleet. Some of those pilots, barely shaving, 7 days of training if you could call it that. 2 for takeoff, 2 for formation flying, 3 for attack runs. Navigation, just follow the leader. Dogfighting, who cares? You're not coming back anyway. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi had cooked up the first official kamikaze unit. Back in October 44, Yukioki had scored the first big hit, sinking the USS St. Lo and turning suicide attacks into a grim science. These new pilots, they actually understood American radar better than their own brass did. They knew those Picket destroyers weren't just ringing the dinner bell, they were the early warning, the fighter controllers, the last line before the fleet. But the Pickets had a fatal flaw, spread out 30 to 60 miles from each other, too far for mutual support. If a mass of kamikazes swarmed one ship, help just couldn't get there fast enough. The odds were nasty. If just 1 out of 6 kamikaze planes hit a target, Japan was coming out ahead on the deal. Trade one pilot and a rusty old plane for a modern destroyer or a few hundred sailors. Japan was willing to pay that price, as brutal as it sounds. That was the new math: cold, efficient, and deadly. Picture this: American destroyers circling up before dawn on April 6th, 1945. Everyone's tense, running in these big 5,000-yard circles, destroyer smack in the middle, support ships fanned out around it like a weird diamond-shaped dance. They're not just cruising in straight lines. Nope, they flip their course every half hour, so any lurking subs get a headache trying to aim a torpedo. Radar's the new king of the battlefield. We're talking SC-2 sweeping the sky every 4 seconds, SGs scouring the water for sneaky boats, Mark 12s and Mark 22s, glued to anything that even thinks about coming close, and the SP radar checking how high the bad guys are flying. Sounds high-tech for 1945, right? But those distances are no joke. 2 Hellcats or Corsairs per picket station during the day. That's it. If the carriers scramble more, it's still a 20 to 30-minute haul to the edge. And those minutes might as well be an eternity when you're watching the horizon for specks of death. Then at 3 a.m., things go sideways. Radar ops start shouting. Contacts, lots of them coming in hot from the northwest. Over 100 blips start swarming at the tactical plot. Lieutenant Frank Adams is supposed to send 2 Corsairs up to meet more than 30 kamikazes. Yeah, good luck with that. The kamikaze pilots know their stuff. They drop down to wave-top height, hiding below the radar horizon. On Destroyer Bush, the CIC, that's the nerve center, is going nuts. Tracking raids from all over. 40 planes here, 20 there. Mystery group on another bearing. Commander Westholm tells his gunners, don't wait for perfect shots. Open up at 12,000 yards and keep firing till it's over or they're overhead. Everything inbound is hostile, period. Nobody's taking chances. Bush's nightmare kicks off at 1500. They shoot down 2, but a Japanese torpedo bomber slips through and slams into the starboard side. Explosion rips through the forward engine room, steam everywhere, 14 guys gone in a blink, but Bush is still afloat. Damage control scrambling, gunners are still blazing away. Then Colquhoun shows up around 1700 with 4 more cap fighters. Now it's a full-on brawl, 40 or 50 Japanese aircraft swarming in. Colquhoun gets whacked at 1730, Zero slamming into her deck. 3 more kamikazes right after. Commander Wilson has no choice. Abandoned ship. Colquhoun's gone, 35 crew with her, but Bush keeps slugging it out even as she's falling apart. Another kamikaze hits at 1725, nearly splits her in 2, then a third at 1745 sets off the ammo. Fires rage everywhere. By 1830, Bush rolls over and sinks. 87 out of 307 crew don't make it, including some bigwigs from Destroyer Division 48. Survivors bob in oily water for hours. LCSL R-64 scooping them out after dark. Planes still buzzing overhead. That day's numbers, brutal. Kamikazes took out Bush, Colquhoun, Emmons, and a minesweeper plus 2 ammo ships. 10 more ships got smacked up. But the picket line did its job. The main fleet at Hagushi Anchorage stayed mostly untouched. Destroyers took the beating that was meant for the invasion force. Fast forward to April 15th, USS Laffey rolls up to relieve J. William D. Becton, the skipper, gets briefed by his crew. The Japanese are switching up. No more big waves, now it's little packs at dawn and dusk, or lone planes sneaking in under cloud cover, hitting from all sides to mess with the fire control. Laffey's seen action at Lingayen Gulf and Iwo Jima, but Okinawa's a whole different beast. Japanese airfields are so close, there's no break, just endless general quarters, sometimes all night. Sure enough, on April 16th, Becton's worst fears come true. 7:27 a.m., radar pings a single contact 11 miles out, coming in low with the sun at its back. Becton orders hard right rudder and flank speed. Laffey heels over, engines roaring past 30 knots, and the day's just getting started. The Val pilot came in low, lining up on the bridge, guns blazing from the right side. Range, about 2,000 yards. The guy took a beating, bullets, shrapnel, the whole 9 yards, but just wouldn't quit. At 500 yards, a 5-inch shell went off, right under him, ripped the left wing clean off, and sent the plane spinning into the ocean, maybe 50 yards off Laffey's hull. That was just the warm-up. Right around 8 a.m., CIC called in, more raids incoming. Not just a couple, 50 planes in different groups heading straight for them. Cappy was out there too, trying to hold the line. But honestly, it was a total swarm. What happened next? Absolute chaos. 80 minutes of non-stop hell. Probably the worst dogfight any destroyer ever saw. 22 kamikazes would come for Laffey, sometimes one at a time, sometimes in packs. The first 8 blasted right out of the sky. Gun crews had it down to a science. Track, fire, don't stop to check if you hit. Just move on to the next one. No time for high fives, no victory laps. There was always another one diving in. Then 827 rolls around. The 9th kamikaze got through, a Judy coming in from the rear where the guns couldn't really reach. Even after taking a beating from the 40s and 20s, the plane slammed right into gun mount 53, the aft 5-inch. Boom, 6 men dead, including the mount captain, Lawrence Dowski, who'd been running the show back there. Fire everywhere, ammo cooking off. Mount 53, gone. That's a big chunk of Laffey's firepower wiped out, and they barely had time to breathe. The 10th kamikaze hit minutes later, another Judy from the left rear, crashing into the after deck house, took out 2 20mm mounts and the crews with them. Flames spreading fast, heading for the after magazine. Damage control went all in, fighting to keep the ship from blowing sky high while the rest kept shooting. The 11th attacker, another Val, dropped a bomb right between the stacks, punched through to the machine shop, then blew up. Steam lines ruptured, lights went out. 2 more gun mounts lost power, so the crews cranked them by hand. Rate of fire? Yeah, way down. 9 a.m. hit, and things looked grim. 4 kamikazes came at once from all sides. Laffey's fire control couldn't keep up, could only track 2. The first slammed into a mount, the second hit near the waterline on port, the third dropped a bomb that exploded in the after-engine room. The fourth, gunned down just 100 yards out, thanks to Seaman Arafat Foutrides, who stayed at his 20mm mount, even though he was already hit by shrapnel. Laffey was burning stem to stern. The rudder jammed hard left, so she was just spinning in circles at 8 knots. A third of the crew casualties. 6 gun mounts trashed. Commander Becton was getting reports from every corner. Things were bad, but not hopeless. Forward guns still worked. The fire teams were making headway, and somehow the ship was still afloat. Lieutenant Frank Manson, the assistant comms officer, asked if they should prep to abandon ship. Becton shot back with what would become legend. No, I'll never abandon ship as long as a single gun will fire. One of the lookouts quietly added, and if I can find one man to fire it. 4 more kamikazes showed up over the next 20 minutes. Gunners took down 3. The fourth, a Zero carrying a 550 LB bomb, smashed into the base of the forward stack. The explosion launched the whole bridge structure into the air before it crashed back down. In CIC, every guy got knocked out cold for a few seconds. When they came to, thick smoke everywhere, radar dead. For 3 long minutes, Laffey couldn't see or talk to anyone, blind and deaf. Then the 20th kamikaze came in during that blackout. No warning, no orders, just raw instinct. Gun crews fired on their own, with gunner's mate Robert Carr on Mount 44 spotting a Val diving from 8,000 feet. His team, working by hand, kept up the fire. The Val blew up 500 feet above and rained debris on the deck. The 21st kamikaze snuck in from behind, hidden in Laffey's own smoke. A Kate torpedo bomber, flying low, aiming for the forward magazine. Foutrides, still at his battered 20mm, spotted it 400 yards out, let loose a burst that walked straight into the Kate's engine. The plane wobbled, nosed over, and crashed 30 yards off the port side. The explosion doused the burning ship with seawater, actually helping put out some fires. The last one, number 22, came in at 9:47, 80 minutes of non-stop attack. The crew running on fumes, most of the guns gone, ammo almost out. But LCS L-51 was still fighting beside them, and somehow Laffey was still afloat. Lieutenant Chering didn't mess around. He slammed the throttle, shoved his gunboat right between the kamikaze and the destroyer. The Val pilot had, a couple seconds to make up his mind? Go for the big juicy destroyer or settle for the smaller fry? He picked the Laffey. That kamikaze buzzed just 50 feet over LCSL 51, its landing gear, almost taking out the mast. Chering's gunners, they lit that plane up, rounds tearing through the belly, smoke pouring out, then fire. And just like that, the Val went down, crash landing into the drink 100 yards from Laffey. Battle's done. Laffey's still in one. Peace somehow after 22 kamikaze runs in about an hour and a half. She took 6 direct hits from planes, 4 from bombs, 32 dead, 71 wounded. Brutal. Yet, she's still floating. Feels impossible, right? But the numbers don't lie. Her gunners fired over 8,000 rounds, shot down 9 kamikazes outright and messed up 4 more so badly they just crashed or missed. The fire control radar kept working even after taking hits. Proximity fuses, total game changers. Combat Info Center kept everything stitched together. Even half-broken tech and training beat out raw desperation. This wasn't just old-school Navy brawling anymore. Okinawa's radar picket destroyers flipped the script on naval warfare. For the first time, electronics mattered more than thick armor or sheer speed. These destroyers weren't just out there as bait. They were like floating command centers, managing a battle space that stretched 60 miles wide and up to 30,000 feet high. Picket ships had fighter direction teams that straight up revolutionized air defense. During Okinawa, they managed over 5,000 fighter interceptions, knocking almost 1,900 enemy planes out of the sky before they could even try anything. Radar saw what human eyes couldn't, tracked what brains couldn't keep up with. Even in the dark, fog or smoke, guided weapons still found their mark. But man, the price was bloody. During the 82 days at Okinawa, radar picket destroyers caught hell. 15 destroyers and minesweepers lost, 45 more damaged, nearly 5,000 sailors killed or wounded just on picket duty. Those ships did their job, drawing fire and soaking up punishment to protect the main fleet. On May 4th, Kamikazes swarmed and sank Morrison and Luce at radar Picket Station 1. Morrison went down in minutes. 4 planes hit her back-to-back. 152 crew lost out of 331. Her radar tracked everything perfectly, guns blazing non-stop, fire control doing its thing. But when you've got 40 planes coming at you, sometimes numbers just win. Even the Japanese figured it out. Captain Rikihei Inaguchi, the guy who basically invented kamikaze tactics, wrote later about these battles and said the American destroyers fought with mind-blowing guts. Their radar gave them an edge nobody expected. They could see Japanese planes forming up back at the airfields, follow them for hundreds of miles. Their gunnery was just ruthless, but Inaguchi admitted something big. They thought the pickets would be easy targets. Out on their own, nope. The radar made them part of a giant, wired-in defense net. Hit one, and suddenly you're up against dozens of ships and hundreds of fighters working together. The tech gap was just too much. Japanese pilots flying junky old planes with barely any training went up against radar-guided guns, firing shells that exploded near the target, and against American fighters directed by controllers on board ships. The whole thing had shifted. Dogfights replaced by electronic chess matches. Japanese pilots expected to catch the Americans napping, but instead ran into a buzzsaw of perfectly organized defense. Radar operators chilling in air-conditioned rooms tracked every move from takeoff to crash. Fighter directors, cool as ice, called the shots like it was just another day at the office. The old days of the lone warrior, toast. Now it was all about the techies. By mid-May, the Japanese tried to adapt, going after pickets when the weather messed up radar, flying low behind islands, dropping chaff to jam the screens. Both sides kept tweaking their tech, but the Americans were always a step ahead. New radars plugged coverage gaps better, IFF systems cut down friendly fire. Every time the Japanese tried something, the US just cranked the tech up another notch. Man, those data links between ships, absolutely game-changer stuff. Suddenly, destroyers aren't just lobbing shells and hoping for the best. They're running coordinated defense like it's some high-stakes multiplayer video game. And the tech edge, it didn't slow down. It just kept snowballing. Take the destroyer Hugh W. Hadley at Picket Station 15 May 11th. Over 150 kamikaze and regular planes swarm in, waves on waves. The Hadley's CIC is juggling 6 radar plots at once, herding a dozen cap fighters and calling shots with 3 other ships. It's chaos, but it's organized chaos. End result? 23 enemy planes bite the dust. The Hadley gets wrecked, but stays afloat, barely. 28 dead, 67 wounded. But without radar, they'd have been wiped out, no contest. Commander Melanie, Hadley's skipper, summed it up. Now, Mike, radar picket duty was the Navy's version of the infantry point man, out front, first to get hit. But where the point man can see a few yards, we had eagle eyes. We saw death coming from 50 miles out and got ready for it. Cold comfort, but he's got a point. The industrial side? Just as nuts. American yards cranked out more than 200 new radar sets a month. The Japanese, their plane production dropped below 500 per month, and most of those were already outdated. You don't need to be a math whiz to see where that's going. The Americans were getting better, faster. Every downed kamikaze cost Japan months of training they couldn't replace. And every battered destroyer the US dragged back got a refit and a tougher, smarter crew. Japanese command thought they could bleed the US dry by attrition. Instead, they got steamrolled by American factories. By June 22nd, 1945, Okinawa's resistance ended. Those radar picket stations, 90 days of non-stop action, tracking thousands of attacks, sending fighters after nearly 2,000 raids, and shooting it out with about 600 kamikazes that made it through. The strategy didn't just work. It totally flipped the script in the Pacific. Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan, straight up borrowed the blueprint. Massive radar picket lines, hundreds of destroyers with the new gear, command ships to run the show. Japan wasn't going to be fighting lone ships anymore. It'd be up against a wall of electronic eyes and guns, all talking to each other. Ugaki, the Japanese air commander, nailed it with his last words. The Americans have built an invisible wall. Our pilots smash against it like birds on glass. We see the target, but can't reach it. Technology beats spirit. USS Laffey survived, stuck around for 3 decades, and now sits as a floating museum. Her radar might look ancient now, but back then it was a total revolution. Seeing past the horizon, tracking dozens of targets, calling in strikes with scary precision, it changed everything. Commander Becton, looking back, put it bluntly, Okinawa proved wars aren't about guts or sacrifice anymore. They're about who's got the best tech and can build it faster than the other guy. Those radar picket destroyers? Not just ships. They were floating proof of American know-how. But man, the price. Almost 5,000 US Navy killed or wounded on radar picket duty alone. 2,000 kamikaze sorties, hundreds of young Japanese pilots, kids really sent to die for nothing. The lesson? Sacrifice alone doesn't win wars anymore. Electronics do. Information is king. If you can see the enemy first and act faster, you win. That's the future. Radar pickets didn't just defend ships, they showed what warfare would become. Now, at the bottom of the Pacific, there are wrecked destroyers and Japanese planes. Both sides' crews remembered for guts, not for what they accomplished. But their real legacy? That was the moment when tech took over, when the guys working radar mattered more than admirals, when math started beating heroics. From then on, the future belonged to whoever could make and use sophisticated electronics and train people to wield them. That's the brutal truth. Those radar picket destroyers at Okinawa, man, they didn't just scrape by with a battle win. They basically blew the doors open on what war was about to become. Suddenly, it wasn't just about who had the biggest guns or thickest armor. Nah, the real fight was happening in this invisible world. All wires and signals and blips on a screen. If your side had better sensors and could process info faster, basically, if you could see the other guy before he saw you, you'd walk away with the win. That was it. Welcome to the age of electronic warfare, stamped right there in the twisted metal and sacrifice of the crews, watching for kamikazes wedged between certain death and the rest of the fleet. Their real legacy? Forget the cannons. It's those radar dishes and antenna, the stuff that let them spot trouble coming and sometimes, not always, do something about it. That's what changed everything.